You're standing in a rainforest at night, waist deep in fog, when something catches your eye on a wet leaf. A frog, small, green, ordinary, until you flip it over, and through its stomach you can see its heart beating. You can count the eggs inside a female. You can watch blood flowing through arteries in real time, like you're looking at a living anatomy chart. Glass frogs are not just transparent. They are one of the most biologically bizarre vertebrates on Earth, and we are only now beginning to understand how they pulled this off. Because here's the thing, transparency in nature is rare. Almost nothing with bones, organs, and blood manages to stay invisible. And the few creatures that do, jellyfish, larval fish, live in water where light bends differently and camouflage is easier. Glass frogs live on land. They have red blood. They have livers, intestines, lungs, all the things that should make them opaque. And yet, when you look at their belly, it's like someone turned on X-ray mode. For over a century, scientists assumed this was just clever pigment placement, or maybe some kind of optical illusion. They were wrong. Brand new research published just last year has finally cracked the code, and the answer is so much weirder than anyone predicted. By the end of this video, you'll understand why glass frogs might be rewriting the rules of what blood is even supposed to do. Let's start with what we thought we knew. Glass frogs, family Centralenidae, are found in Central and South American rainforests, mostly along rivers and streams in mountain cloud forests. There are about 160 species, and almost all of them have the same signature feature, translucent skin on their undersides. From above, they look like regular tree frogs, bright green, sticky toe pads, big eyes, but flip them over and you're staring at their insides. You can see the liver, which is usually pale yellow or white. You can see the digestive tract, sometimes filled with insects they just ate. You can see eggs if it's a female. And in some species, you can even see the heart pumping, valves opening and closing, blood rushing through chambers. It's not full invisibility. You can still see the frog, but it's close enough that when they're sitting on a leaf, pressed flat, they become almost impossible to spot. For predators looking up from below, the frog blends perfectly with the dappled light filtering through the canopy. That's the theory anyway, and for decades, that's where the story ended. Transparent belly equals better camouflage, simple. Except it's not simple at all, because there's a massive problem with being transparent when you have blood. Blood is red. Specifically, hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells, is intensely red because it's packed with iron. That red is opaque and it scatters light, it absorbs wavelengths. It should make transparency impossible. Think about it this way. Even a tiny drop of blood in a glass of water turns the whole thing pink. That's how powerful hemoglobin is at absorbing and scattering light. Now imagine trying to make an entire circulatory system transparent while keeping that blood functional. Every capillary, every vein, every artery would glow red like neon tubes under the skin. Transparency would be impossible, and yet glass frogs pull it off. So, what's happening? In 2022, a team of researchers at Duke University decided to actually answer that question. They used a technique called photoacoustic imaging, essentially shining light into tissue and measuring the sound waves that bounce back. It's like sonar, but with light instead of sound. This technique can detect red blood cells, even when they're too diffuse to see with the naked eye. It can track them moving through vessels thinner than human hair. And what they discovered was so strange, it took them months to confirm they weren't making a mistake. Here's the truth. Glass frogs hide their blood, not all the time. Not everywhere, but when they're asleep during the day, when predators are most active, they pull nearly 90% of their red blood cells out of circulation and pack them into their liver. Not the heart, not the spleen, which is what most vertebrates use for blood storage. The liver. They turn their liver into a temporary blood storage organ, concentrating red blood cells so densely that the liver itself becomes dark red, almost maroon. The imaging showed it clearly. During sleep, the liver swells slightly as it fills with packed red blood cells. Meanwhile, the rest of their body, their muscles, their skin, their organs, runs on plasma, the clear liquid portion of blood. No red cells, no hemoglobin, just transparent fluid, keeping everything alive. And this is not normal. This does not happen in any other vertebrate on Earth. When you or I sleep, our blood keeps circulating normally. Our red blood cells stay in our veins. Our liver does liver things, filtering toxins, storing glycogen, producing bile, but it does not become a blood bank. Glass frogs have evolved a completely new biological function for an ancient organ. They've hijacked the liver, repurposed it, turned it into something evolution has never created before. And the craziest part? They do this every single day. When night falls and the frog wakes up to hunt, the red blood cells flood back into circulation. The liver lightens. The frog becomes opaque again. Blood rushes back into the muscles, providing oxygen for movement. The heart pumps normally, vessels fill, and the frog looks like any other frog under a microscope. By morning, when it returns to its hiding spot on the underside of a leaf, the cells get pulled back in and the frog goes transparent. The whole process takes about an hour in each direction. It's a daily cycle of appearing and disappearing, controlled by some mechanism we still don't fully understand. The researchers hypothesize it might be linked to circadian rhythms or perhaps triggered by light levels, but nobody has confirmed the exact biological switch yet. Now, here's where this gets even weirder. Concentrating that many red blood cells in one place should kill the frog. When red blood cells pack together too tightly, they form clots. Clots block blood flow. Clots cause strokes, heart attacks, organ failure. In humans, even a modest increase in red blood cell concentration is dangerous. Humans who have conditions that increase red blood cell concentration, like polycythemia, are at constant risk of life-threatening clots. Their blood becomes thick, sluggish, prone to forming blockages. Doctors have to regularly remove blood from these patients just to keep them alive. Glass frogs store nearly all their red blood cells in their liver for up to 12 hours a day, every day, for their entire lives. And they never clot. Never. The Duke researchers tested this extensively. They measured clotting factors in glass frog blood. They looked at platelet activity, the cell fragments that normally rush to form clots when blood vessels are damaged. They checked for fibrin, the protein that forms the mesh structure of blood clots. They even looked at the physical properties of the blood itself, measuring viscosity and flow characteristics. Nothing. No clots, no increased risk. The red blood cells pack into the liver at concentrations that would kill a human in minutes, and the frogs just sleep peacefully through it. Glass frogs have some kind of anticoagulation system we don't understand yet. Something in their biology prevents clotting even under conditions that would instantly kill a mammal. It might be a novel protein that coats the red blood cells, preventing them from sticking together. It might be a chemical signal that deactivates platelets when cells are stored in the liver. It might be something nobody has even thought to look for yet. Whatever it is, it's revolutionary. If we could figure out how they do this, it could revolutionize human medicine. Stroke prevention, heart attack treatment, safer surgeries, blood thinners that don't cause uncontrolled bleeding. All because a tiny frog in Ecuador evolved the ability to hide its blood. The pharmaceutical implications alone are staggering. Current anticoagulants like warfarin and heparin work by interfering with the clotting cascade, but they're blunt instruments. They prevent clots, but they also prevent normal clotting when you need it, like when you get a cut. Glass frog biology might offer a way to prevent pathological clots, the bad ones that cause strokes and heart attacks, while leaving normal hemostatic clotting intact. That's not speculation. That's the direct medical application of understanding how a frog hides. But let's zoom out for a second, because the liver trick isn't the only bizarre thing about glass frog transparency. Their bones are partially transparent too. Normally, bones are opaque because they're packed with calcium phosphate crystals that scatter light in every direction. That's why you can't see through a chicken bone or a human finger bone. The crystalline structure is essentially a biological mirror maze. But glass frog bones have a different microstructure entirely. Under an electron microscope, their bones look less like dense mineral and more like a sponge, thin struts of calcium arranged in patterns that let light pass through with minimal scattering. The spaces between the struts are filled with marrow and blood vessels, but even those are arranged to minimize light absorption. It's not full transparency. You can still see the skeleton, but it's enough that their leg bones don't cast shadows when light hits them from below. From a predator's perspective, looking up at a glass frog on a leaf, the bones don't register as a solid object. They're just faint lines in an otherwise translucent body. Then there's the guanine trick, and this one is genuinely clever. Guanine is a compound that a lot of animals use for reflective coloration. It's what makes fish scales shiny, what gives chameleons their metallic hues, what makes some butterfly wings look iridescent. It's essentially nature's glitter, tiny crystals that reflect light in specific ways. Glass frogs have guanine crystals embedded in their skin, but instead of reflecting light uniformly like a mirror, these crystals are tuned to scatter it in very specific ways. The result? Their green dorsal skin doesn't just absorb certain wavelengths, it diffuses light so evenly that edges blur. When a glass frog sits on a leaf, the scattered light from its back blends seamlessly with the scattered light from the leaf itself. No hard outlines and no shadows, just a vague greenish smudge that predators can't resolve into frog. The human eye, and presumably predator eyes like birds and snakes, relies heavily on edge detection. We see objects by detecting where one thing ends and another begins. Glass frogs eliminate those edges. The transition from frog to leaf is so gradual, so diffuse, that visual processing systems just skip over it. It's not invisibility. It's better. It's the biological equivalent of Photoshop blur, applied in real time across an entire living body. And all of this, the blood hiding, the bone structure, the light scattering, evolved independently. Glass frogs aren't related to any other transparent animals. They didn't inherit these traits from a see-through ancestor. They built transparency from scratch, using tools no other vertebrate ever thought to use. This is convergent evolution at its most extreme. Nature solving the same problem, how do I not get eaten, in a way that has never been tried before. Compare this to other transparent animals. Glass catfish are transparent, but they're tiny, aquatic, and they don't have to deal with gravity pulling their organs out of position. Ice fish in Antarctica are partially transparent, but they lack hemoglobin entirely. They transport oxygen dissolved directly in their plasma, which only works because Antarctic water is so cold and oxygen-rich. Glass frogs kept their hemoglobin, kept their complex organ systems, kept everything that makes a vertebrate, and then just made it invisible anyway. So here's what we're left with. A frog that hides 90% of its blood in its liver every morning. A frog whose bones let light pass through. A frog whose skin scatters photons to erase its outline. A frog that has somehow solved one of biology's hardest problems, vertebrate transparency, using mechanisms we're only beginning to decode. And the wildest part? We almost missed it entirely. Glass frogs have been known to science since 1872. That's over 150 years ago. People have been looking at them, studying them, writing papers about them for generations. But it wasn't until 2022, last year, that anyone thought to check what happens to their blood while they sleep. We were so focused on the transparency itself that we never asked how they maintain it. We assumed it was passive, just a side effect of thin skin and good luck? Turns out it's active. It's something the frog does, a behavior encoded in its biology, a daily cycle as essential as breathing. Now that we know, the next question is obvious. What else are we missing? Because if glass frogs can do this, if they can rewrite the rules of blood circulation, bone structure, and light physics, what other impossible things are hiding in plain sight? How many other animals have we looked at for decades without understanding the real mechanisms behind their adaptations? Right now, researchers are trying to sequence the genes responsible for the liver blood storage mechanism. If they succeed, if they can identify the proteins that prevent clotting under those conditions, it could lead to entirely new classes of anticoagulant drugs. Medicines that don't just thin blood, but actively prevent clot formation without increasing bleeding risk. They're also looking at whether this mechanism could be adapted for blood storage in medical settings. Currently, donated blood can only be stored for about 42 days before the red blood cells start to break down. If we understood how glass frogs keep red blood cells stable in high concentrations, maybe we could extend that window, saving lives during blood shortages. That's not speculation. That's the direct medical application of understanding how a frog hides. And beyond medicine, glass frogs are teaching us something deeper about evolution itself. We used to think transparency was a niche adaptation, something that only works underwater, something that requires sacrificing complexity. Glass frogs prove that's wrong. You can be complex. You can have organs, blood, bones. You can live on land, deal with gravity, handle temperature fluctuations, and you can still vanish. You just have to be willing to redesign everything. These frogs didn't simplify, they innovated. They took the machinery of a vertebrate body and said, what if we made this invisible? And then they did it. Not over thousands of years, over millions. Not through one mutation, through dozens, maybe hundreds, all working together. The blood-hiding mechanism alone probably required changes to liver structure, red blood cell membrane proteins, chemical signaling pathways, and circadian rhythm regulation. The bone transparency required restructuring the entire skeletal system at a microscopic level. The skin light scattering required precise tuning of guanine crystal size, distribution, and orientation. Each of these systems had to evolve in parallel, all of them working toward the same goal. And somehow, despite the astronomical odds, it happened. Glass frogs are not just transparent. They are proof that biology has no limits except the ones we assume. They are proof that evolution can solve problems we didn't think were solvable. They are proof that somewhere in some rainforest, on some wet leaf, nature is doing something impossible right now, and we just haven't noticed yet. If this completely rewired how you think about frogs or blood or evolution or what's actually possible in biology, leave a comment. Tell me what other impossible animals you want me to cover next, because nature is full of them. And I'm just getting started. Subscribe if you haven't already, because next month we're diving into the immortal jellyfish, the only animal that can reverse its own aging. And trust me, that story is even stranger than this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.